Rakesh, what is your interest in prasadams or sacred offerings as you call it?
Thank you very much and good evening. It's lovely to be here in such a beautiful space. Prasadams, so when you think of prasadams, what comes to my mind is temple wall inscriptions. Temple wall inscriptions in the Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple in Srirangam. As we speak, they are documenting more and more inscriptions in Srirangam. More than 640, if I remember right, have been uncovered. And these inscriptions, when you actually look at them, they are a treasure trove of information. It talks about the entire region, the number of conquests that has had, literally the daily minutes of the temple which has been recorded, and most importantly, it talks about kings' donations. Now, when kings donated, they donated fully functional, economically viable villages. And what I mean by that was the village, whatever revenue, it was all surplus, and all the revenue went into the temple administration. All the first produce like rice, lentils, whatever it was given to the temple kitchen. Daily produce like dairy and all other things were also given to the temple. So the temple in turn put it to use, made prasadams and gave it to the people. Now, back in the day, the only form of social engagement for people was visiting temples. They would go there. Any form of news that had to be disseminated was again at the temple. Any dance performance, music performance was at the temple. So people went to the temple every day. Even today, if you go to the Srirangam temple, outside the temple kitchen, there is a small, in one of the pillars, there is a murti called Anna Murti, which is there. He holds payasam in one hand, in one jug, and there's a plate of rice that he holds. He's supposed to be the quality checker. He's supposed to pretty much safeguard the kitchen. There's also one of the most beautifully restored granaries, Nel Kalanjiyam as it is called in Tamil, which is there in Srirangam. So going back even further, when you look into the Agama Shastra, which is the sacred texts that talk about, the religious, what are the kind of festivities, what is the kind of rituals that one must follow, it talks in detail about temple consecration. Right? So it says, if your temple, this is how it must be consecrated. It's almost like Vastu Shastra, but a lot more in detail. What it also mentions is about the temple kitchen. Where must it be located? What are the ingredients that are allowed inside? What firewood should be used? Where must the firewood be procured? What are the ingredients? What is the quality? Number of people required to make the recipe? What is the lineage they should come from? So many things are recorded. And for me, when I look at these kind of prasadams, for me, it is the entire understanding it holistically, like the region, the economy, the seasonal produce. What is that people were doing back then? Right? So obviously for me, that is one way of looking at it. But tell me, how integral is that food and faith combined?
Thank you. So I think we'll ask you the questions, but feel free to look at the audience that they are part of us too. Yeah. So prasadams are a Hindu construct, but offerings are a global construct in every ancient religion. And it's not even offering. I think the Latin word for it is oblation, which is what we use for the havans nowadays, the homums as we call it. That is a sacred offering. And Naivedyam becomes prasadam only after it is offered to the god. And the god, it's the gracious gift of the god. That is the meaning of the word. When I wrote the book, I concentrated mostly on Hindu temples, but I wanted to include every faith that is in India. Except for Jainism, which really doesn't have this idea, because of course Jainism is about don't harm nature and don't touch anything, don't pick flowers. So prasadams, I couldn't find an authentic Jain temple that did prasadams, but Ajmer Dargah does it, churches in Goa do it. In Genesis, Cain offered fruits to the Lord, so it exists. And every old faith, whether it's the fertility cults, the goddess cults, the polytheistic, animistic faiths that existed all over the world, had offering. Now, why did humans invent this idea, which I will call prasadam, but I mean offering? The earliest offerings were at burial grounds, burial mounds, and they happen globally. And when you think about it, each offering has two components. One is a pact that you make with your God, whoever it is. It is a sacred pact that says, because you give to me, I will return to you because I want more. I want you to give more to me. So it is that pact. And offerings are a way to do it with a ritual, with a little bit of grace. So as I traveled through India, the beauty of how these prasadams are offered in Jagannath Puri, they carry it like a kavadi with two things balancing on each other, and they dance in and offer it to the gods. So that was the beauty of the offerings. And like I said, the early offerings were beyond the fruits and the vegetables. There were sacrifices. So today in the Northeast particularly, you still have sacrifices. And Wendy Doniger writes in her book, The Hindu, what we offer as offerings these days, it used to be that humans offered themselves. So then it boils down, then there are animals offered, then trees, and now we have the samitir, which is just twigs and leaves and ghee. So I think prasadams are a way for us to connect to the divine and also get something back. So we've talked about 4 ingredients, Rakesh, and rice is the first one we decided to talk about. And tell me about, I know you love the rice prasadams, and tell us about it a little bit.
So it's interesting you brought out the Jain and the kind of faith that the prasadams that they make. So there is a Tamil Jain community that is there, which you will find. And when you ask them, I said, so when did you migrate? They're like, no, we are from here. We speak Tamil. It's not like they lived in Tamil Nadu and they got on to speaking Tamil. They have been there since the time. So they make something called a Vella Puri. It's incredible. It's a small puri which is made with rice flour. And that also kind of equates to what you asked about rice, because rice is something that has been around since time immemorial. Going back in time, when you look at rice, this was something that was found in China as a wild grass. It was called Oryza sativa, which was domesticated. And then it made its way from China to Southeast Asia to Sri Lanka and then India, and then spread its way across the Middle East, and it became a world phenomenon. But if you look at rice, particularly in the context of prasadam, this is something, South being the rice bowl of India, almost all prasadams are rice-based. You have your Ven Pongal, Chakra Pongal, tamarind rice, coconut rice, lemon rice. Then people went one step further where they, as mechanization sort of improved, or even with mortar and pestle in a larger quantity, that they would make rice flour, and they made adirsams. That was one of the prasadams. Even for one step further was they made a paste out of it, they cooked it, and they dried it out like pasta sheets. You have the Kerala payasam. So there is a lot of rice as we consume. And in India alone, at one point of time, there were more than 250,000 varieties of indigenous rice. And for me, when I go into history and understand it from, say, Sangam literature, which is one of the things that I refer to quite often, it's amazing. It is so poetic in the way that rice names have been given. It's so much to say that they love the rice or that they love the language. Right? It is so profound. And when you talk about the concept of rice, there is prasadams that are dairy intensive also. My favorite being the Akara Disal, which is what I'm going to be demonstrating today. It's a beautiful story. But in the context of dairy, right? So what is it? What is the offering that stood out for you in your travels, and what anecdotes do you have to share?
So now we move from rice to milk, and but in the context of rice, and since we are in Karnataka, Rakesh, there is in Udupi particularly, there is a notion called the Chaturmasya Vrata, where you know what that is, and they don't eat certain things for certain periods. But what I found interesting was during the Navaratri period, the thing that you were allowed to eat was rice, and all the prasadams for the goddess are rice-based. Every day you do a different type of chitrana.
Yeah.
So I think what you said earlier about the seasonal, the local, what's available, but also in this day of intermittent fasting, denying yourself certain things, and we call it toxic for detox and stuff, but they for 1 month wouldn't eat certain things. But dairy, of course, cows of India are my favorite, and I've been fascinated by why the Hindus in particular, why are we so obsessed with cows? And so so in my book, I say the favorite place for dairy, if you would want prasadam, is actually in Kerala. It's called Ambalapura. And the palpayasam there is made in a huge urali. I took photographs of it. And it's just 3 things, milk, rice, and sugar. And they make it vattify, as we call in Tamil, but what it really means is it reduces.
Reduces them.
Yeah. But I want to tell you the story of this because it's a really cool story for those who are mathematically inclined. So the story typically for temple, the Sthala Puranas involve power in the form of a king, a seeker in the form of either a small boy. Unfortunately, most are boys. There's not too many girls unless there are Devi temples. And so in this Ambalapura Palpayasam, the king said, a Brahmin came and he asked for some rice or paddy. And the king said, oh, sure, and I'll challenge you to a game of chaturanga or chess, and whoever wins will give something to the other. The Brahmin won. And the king, still arrogant, still full of ego, said, okay, ask me what you want, I'll give it to you. And the Brahmin said, I want as much rice as there are in this chessboard in a particular order. 1 grain of rice for the second, 2 grains of rice. I'll actually read this because I don't want to mess it up. So the legend goes that the Brahmin said 1 grain of rice for the first, and the second grain 2, the third grain 4, the fourth grain the second square 2, the third square 4, the fourth square 8, the fifth square 16, and you know what's coming because So the king immediately and foolishly said sure, without realizing a geometric progression, and apparently there was not enough rice in the kingdom or indeed in the country or the world that would fill this. So it would be some 18 billion grains of rice. So the king, suitably defeated, bent his head and said, okay, what do you want? So the Brahmin magnanimously said, okay, I return this rice to you. You make payasam. Ambalapura Palpayasam's origins, the legend is one of this. So as far as the dairy goes, the milk that Rakesh and I both talk about, what I was moved by is this notion of bhavana. So in Ambalapura to this day, and I say that in the book, after they finish the Palpayasam, the man goes out, the cook, the Rimeni, as they call it, goes out and stands near the temple tank, and he actually calls out, Vasudeva, Vasudeva. So the idea that there is an imaginary God who will come at the allocated time to eat the palpayasam as an offering before we give it to the people is a feat of imagination. And temples routinely do this. And we all, all of us are creative people. And the 2 things that religions in India particularly and all over the world do is they have this notion called bhavana, which is you imagine an offering and you imagine that he or she is actually eating it. That is imagination. That is creativity. So that is the dairy things that that Rakesh and I wanted to talk about. But not all prasadams are sweet. There are savory prasadams too, and it involves grain and it involves certain indigenous spices, which is why I want to sort of toss the ball back to Rakesh and say, is it all milk and honey and sweetness, Rakesh, or in your mind are there other prasadams and the other things that stand out?
Absolutely. So when you think of prasadams, the notion in general is to think it's all vegetarian, it is all very opulent. But we are talking about a wide spectrum of people. One from the community that could afford it, and then you also have the tribals or the indigenous people, which whatever little that they had, they would offer. Now, most of the prasadams, if you look at it, that is made at home, that is made in temples, is all hyper-local, micro-regional, and most importantly, seasonal. Now, the example for this is Sri Ramanavami and the panagam that is made. Panagam, buttermilk, and the kosmali or kosambari. Now, Why is it? Okay, there may be references that Rama would have had something like this, but during peak summer, this is what would cool your body down. You had water, you had jaggery that was diluted in it, there was dry ginger powder which cools your body, there is lemon juice that is added, all of it, and of course cardamom, which just cools your body down. Today we also have fridges to make it chill, but back then this standalone beverage was enough to cool your body down. Same with Neermor. And making use of the peak summer raw mangoes and moong dal, which has been indigenous to this entire region. Ven Pongal, a classic example of a one-pot wonder. We spoke about this even yesterday. Literally, this is a case where your granary is running to the brim in the month of December during Margari, and people are coming and thronging at the temples first thing in the morning. There is a change in weather, so they add pepper to boost your immunity. It's also slightly colder. They add some fat in the form of ghee, and it's a one-pot wonder. So again, something that they put to use with whatever they could find around them. There is a Muttappan temple in Kerala where one of the prasadams is dried fish and toddy. Now, if you go to smaller towns and villages in any part of the south of India, you'll have people who'll have village deities as their favorite god. Karupannasamy, all of that. Right? So for them, it is usually like cigarettes or tobacco or any form of animal sacrifice, because that is what they could afford. That is what they had in abundance, if I can put it that way. Now, another context is when you go to Tirukkurungudi, which is in and around Tirunelveli. It happens to be one of the Navatirupatis. One prasadam that they make is called a Kana Pongal and Kathotika Masir. Kana Pongal is a horse gram pongal. It's very unusual, right, for something being made in the south. And Kathotika is a type of bitter. It's something that grows in the wild, like on fences, you might just see it. It is even more bitter than your pavaka, bitter gourd. Very, very small. It looks like that midi pavaka, but it's not the same. Extreme, like they make a huge pot, they will literally add 1 or 2 pieces of that to flavor. And why do they do this? Because when that utsavam, when the god has been brought out, it so happened that there was this old lady who went inside and said, "This is what I have. This is what I'm going to make and serve you. Take it or leave it." And that is part of the whole prasadam thing today, because it is ultimately what you serve. It is the emotional connect that you have, what you make and serve. Same thing, when especially people who worship Shakti form, they all come from communities where whatever is available is what they will give. And they were people who were rearing goats, maybe had chicken in their house, so they would offer that. It is what, like in my house, for example, the prasadams would be made, but invariably my mother would leave something there and put one tulsi, and she said, "Okay, now it's open, you guys can taste it." But the actual prasadam that she will make, which is untouched according to her, is coconut water. Because in her mind, she's like, that is the purest form, because it is untouched by hand. So, everybody has a different emotion that plays around with it, especially when it comes to prasadam. Now, in your book, you talk about an emotional component, right? And what is that?
Yeah. So, Naivedyam and prasadam are entirely emotional, because I am a food writer as well. And all of us go to these fancy restaurants where the chefs are screaming and shouting and swearing at each other. But in our culture, and specifically Hinduism, people are obsessed with not just what the food is, but how the food is made. So you have to be sattvic, you have to listen to that Om Namah Shivaya, whatever the chant is running in the background. So the temperament of the cook is as important as the product that the cook makes. And the temperament that is most suited for temple prasadams is sublimation of the ego, if I had to pick one quality. And I might add, after doing this book, I thought that's a good quality for life in general. Because, and so I'll give you 4 examples and very quickly. The sublimation of the ego, I saw the most interesting temple I visited, and I visited several, and is the Jagannath Puri temple. And the reason is that it is a pot containing Jainism, Tantric, tribal, Kshatriya and Brahmins. It's all, and so Jagannatha was once called Purushottama. Before that, he was a Jain god, Buddhism. I mean, Vimala Devi, who is Jagannatha's wife, who is an avatar of Lakshmi, was before Jagannatha. So there's the Shakta cult, Shakti cult, you name it, Vaishnava cult, everything is there. And that was my favorite chapter. So in that they say, the cooks say, if we think even for one moment that we are the ones who are making this prasadam, the pots will shatter. Because actually it is Bimala Devi who is making the food. And they have this whole pot on. Number 9 is a very sacred number for them because it is tantric. They have the Navavarana, Navarasas, which Rakesh talked about yesterday. So the 3 pots in the bottom will have grains, then in the middle rice, and then vegetables. And so the emotional component of that is sublimation of the ego and believing that Bimla Devi is cooking. Now we move to Parni, where the emotional component is that people will not buy the Panchamritam that is regularly available, even if it costs less. They will seek out what they call the Abhisheka Panchamritam. And why do they do that? Because the Panchamritam that is put on top of this Lord Muruga or Dandaya the Pani, as he is called, is supposed to get all the good feelings and the good qualities of him, and it is viewed as a healing food. The healing food component is because in Parni, it's a Siddha temple. You have an image of Patanjali there. And a Bhogar, who is a Siddha saint, created the idol. And if you go there, they will say it is made with Nava Pashanam. And they say they call it as poisons. It could be in Sanskrit, it's also interpreted as rocks. And apparently the Siddha saint Bhogar made this idol of Muruga with 4,448 herbs, and this Navapashanam, or 9 rocks or minerals. Now we drink wine and we say minerality and all that. They had that for Muruga as well. And so these people are saying, humans cannot handle this Siddha concoction by itself. So what I'm going to do is make this image, pour the Panchamritam. People can take the Panchamritam and get the goodness of the healing of it. So the emotional component is that you're believing you are going to be healed by this. Then this whole Ambalapura, in Jaipur, there's this notion of Chappan Bhog, which is 56. So I was thinking, why is this number 56 so important? And again, math buffs will know that it's an angel number 56. And I'll read out what I found. Angel number 56 is a promise from your angels to have the confidence and believe that all your needs will be met. So you offer 56 dishes with an attitude of gratitude in the hope that all your wishes will be met. And the last one I want to talk about is the Ajmer Dargah, which is unusual because generally in the Muslim faith is not about prasadams. But in this one, they make a kesariya bath, which is similar to our Karnataka kesari bath. Although it is said in that temple that when Akbar won the battle of Chittorgarh and came and said, I will offer this, the horse meat was also added. So the kesariya bath in today's form, if you go and look, there is these giant vats of kesari bath, and it is offered as that. It is offered as a sacrifice when you win a war. It is offered as a thank you to the god to say, allow me to win more wars. So that is the emotional component of it, which is that the temperament of the cook matters above all. And as anyone who is religious is obsessed with this temperament of the cook, which is the opposite of modern day life. Now, there is food and temperament of the cook, and there's also cooking techniques, which is Rakesh's domain. And so do you think cooking techniques make a difference in the concept and the offering of the prasadams?
Absolutely. Now you go into any temple kitchen, what I've heard, I've seen it from far, obviously I've not gone inside, but all these temple kitchens, most of them at least, still adhere to traditional ways of cooking. Firewood, the panchaloham, which is the 5 essential metals that go into it while making it, like the Alagar Kovil dosa, for example, is made like there is almost a kilo or 2 kilos of batter that is poured in that, which will just fry in a mixture of oil and ghee. And that color, the stone is made of panchaloham, and it will just, sizzle. They'll keep adding the firewood in and out to keep the heat. So there is a lot to do with the minerals that go into it. If you go into parts of Kumbakonam, right, prasadams there will be made with these brass utensils, which will have the panchaloham. Again, because these were minerals, these were things that were available in plenty. And they had to put it to use, and they made utensils out of it. So even today, when you go to Kumbakonam, you will find around the temples there, these brass ware, like the jaggery coffee is brass. Right? So all of that. Then when you, terracotta, soapstone, all these are things that is used. Terracotta, especially in the context of Srirangam. They make, once a year, they make this Akkara Adisal sweet, which is on the Panguni Uttaram day. Just got over. On that particular day, these huge pots of terracotta where they will make this Akkara Adisal sweet. And once they make it, they will take a log of firewood that is smoking. They won't dip it inside, but they will place it on top and cover it with a plate. Because, I mean, generally prasadams have that, whether it is that kadam prasadam or, chakara pongal, it has that nice smoky edge to it, right? So things like that, the aravana that is made in Srirangam, again, once they make it, they will break the pot. Because ultimately, what is it? You're regenerating the soil. One
Correct.
rain that comes,
Correct.
it melts and you kind of using it like that. And that is
Correct.
essentially what it is.
Correct.
Many people have always asked me, do you think, using traditional cookware is going to alter the taste? You may not be able to find a visible, or it's not something that you can, but innately you are taking in all the essential minerals that go into while making that, say, terracotta ware or soapstone ware.
Correct.
Because they came from earth.
Correct.
And these are things that are meant to,
Correct.
put it in like that. So yeah, the cooking techniques are incredible, the way they would cook it, and it is a sight to watch them cook, because they will be juggling between so many things. They will be reciting hymns. The one person will be frying the nuts. They will just boil the jaggery and the water, and it's like a restaurant standard operating procedure. But you ask them, they may not be able to. It's like talking to your mom or grandmom about recipes. They'll just say, ivladha. But you go and ask them beyond that, can I get it standardized? They'll be like, no, you've come to the wrong place.
Yes.
We'll give it to you in your hand, eat it and go.
Yes. Yeah. And so one thing that occurred to me as you were speaking, Rakesh, and is that the cooking techniques are there, and also the ingredients. Most of the temples in Karnataka, and particularly the Udupi temple, uses pumpkins and matta gulla, which is the brinjal.
Type of brinjal.
Yeah. And I was just thinking that we all assume that because the ingredients are humble and the cooking techniques are fairly old, that the taste is kind of standardized. But I think what I found, and in sampling all the prasadams, especially the langar, the langar in the Golden Temple was a sight to behold, like Rakesh said, is that the taste change. I was there for 5 days. Every day it was slightly different. I think so then I got to thinking, maybe the intervention of the cook matters, even if the dishes, the dal is the same, the chapati is the same, but every day there was a slight difference based on who was doing it. And so there's, in Tamil we call enna padivigal, the thoughts of the imprint of your thoughts comes through the food.
Absolutely.
So we thought that after this, now it's about 7:00, and we thought we'll have Rakesh cook and we can watch, and then we'll come back and we can do a little more free for all, and we can take questions from you, because I think we need to finish by 7:45 or so. So now I'm going to just sit here and let Rakesh cook and do his thing.
Okay, so we are going to be seeing how the Akkara Adisal is made in the temple of Srivilliputturu. Now, there is a different version of the same recipe that is made in Srirangam, but whatever was taught to me was based on the Srivilliputturu Andal temple. This, in my opinion, and I think you will agree, is one of those sweets that is steeped in love. Not just from us liking, there is obviously a historical connect to this, which I will talk about. But if you look at the etymology of the word Akkara Adisal, Akkara Adisal. Many people say Akkara Vadisal also, but it's Akkara Adisal as per the Pasuram that is mentioned in the Nachiyar Tirumozhi. Akkara is chakara or jaggery. Adisal is anything that is cooked, boiled or mashed. That's what it is. So it is a one-pot wonder is all I can say. So when you talk, we will get started with the recipe, and as we progress, I will talk to you. For this recipe, what you will need is about 3 to 4 cups of milk. I have that here, which I'm just going to boil. and they were nice enough to add the saffron to the milk. So you could use just regular milk as well. Now to this, I'm going to be adding some nutmeg. First, I'll tell you the ingredients that you'll require. About 3 cups or 4 cups of milk, roasted nuts in the way you want. Here, this is a cheats version, okay? This is not how it is made in the temple. Here I have about a cup of rice and half cup of moong dal that I have pressure cooked in, say, 2 glasses of 2 cups of milk and about 3 cups of water, because you will not pressure cook with just milk because it will split. I have about 2 cups of jaggery. This again depends on your jaggery and how sweet it can be. Lots of ghee, because Andal talks about it extensively in her thing. You have roasted nuts. I have some nutmeg, literally a pinch of nutmeg, a pinch of cardamom powder. I'm going to be adding all of that. This is mace. Now, a word of caution when you add mace and nutmeg, when you initially smell it, you may think like this does not have any smell, but trust me, once you make this, put it into the casserole and open it, if you've overdone it, it will smell only of nutmeg. That's how overpowering the spice is. So little bit of nutmeg. And I have my cardamom powder here. Right? So we will wait for that to come to a boil. Now when you say Akaradisil, I said Andal is integral. When you say Andal, her foster father, who happens to be Periyalvar, is again integral to the story. Now, Periyalvar was a devout Vishnu Bhakt. For those of you who may not know, he and Andal are part of the 12 Alvars. Now, Alvars are those who wrote extensively on Lord Vishnu, sacred hymns, verses. They traveled extensively across and they wrote in respective temples and their deities. And every temple that they visited and wrote about is called the Divya Desam. There are about 107 temples, 108th being Vaikuntham. Right? So they wrote extensively. And Periyalvar was a devout Vishnu Bhakt. Right? And in his verses, there is a lot of emotion that he has expressed. Now, in one of his prayers, he says he does not have a child and he prays to the Lord to bless him with one. And one fine day, what happens is he goes to the temple and by the tulsi plant inside the Srivilliputturu Andal temple, he finds a baby girl. He brings her home, names her Andal, and Andal grows up watching her father. The kind of prowess he has over the language, the way he writes, his devotion to the Lord, and is enamored by the Lord. So she falls in love with the Lord at Sri Rangamannar. And it so happens that in all of this, Periyalvar has the habit of making flower garlands for the Lord every day. And Andal is known to have worn it. Now, this is something that is taboo even now. Any prasadam or anything that we make that is offered to the Lord, you can't either taste it or smell it even. So, Andal once was caught in that act by Periyalvar and he says, you should not be doing something like this. For which he says she will not, and from that day she backs off and she says, fine, I won't do it. But it is known that the Lord appeared in Periyalvar's dreams and said, only if Andal wears it, will I accept it. So that was the deep connection, that was the love. And of course, the Akaradisil story will unfold. Now, when you talk about the region of Srivilliputturu, back then, now Periyalvar's verses in the Prabandhams and Andal's verses, they have a lot of dairy that they've mentioned. Milk, yogurt, butter. Am I audible? Milk, dairy, butter, all of this is there. And to think about that place, how it was back then, you equate it to today. What is famous in Srivilliputturu? It is the Palgova. So to think that this is literally a blast from the past that continues to be even today was magical for me in my understanding, because this is a leftover from there that we are enjoying today. And as the milk boils, and talking about dairy, I will open today with Vaitha Neyyum Kainda Palum, which is a Periyalvar Pasuram. இத்தனையும் வைத்தனையும் காய்ந்த பாலும் வைத்தனையும் காய்ந்த பாலும் வடித்தயிரும் நறுவெண்ணையும் வடித்தயிரும் நறுவெண்ணையும் இத்தனையும் பெற்றிறியேன் எம்பிரானே இத்தனையும் பெற்றிறியேன் எம்பிரானி எம்பிரானி பிறந்த பின்னே எம்பிரானி எம்பிரானி பிறந்த பின்னே இத்தனையும் செய்ய பெற்றாய் ஏதும் செய்யேன் கதம் படாதே முத்தணிய முறுவல் செய்து மூக்கு உறிஞ்சி முலை உணாயே முத்தணிய முறுவல் செய்து மூக்கு உறிஞ்சி முலை உணாயே முத்தணிய முறுவல் செய்து குருஜி முலை உணாயே Now, for those of you who may not understand Tamil, this is a pasaram where Periyalvar takes the role of the mother. You know, all these pasarams are steeped in emotion of absolute surrender, devotion, love, lust, so many things that come out in this. So the translation for what I sang, the ghee that I had saved, the boiled milk, even the butter, everything disappears so quickly since you have come into our lives. I let you do what you want. You silence me with your radiant smile. Take a sniff and suckle. So that was Periyalvar's verses. Now, going back into cooking. Now the milk is boiled very nicely. To this, I'm going to be adding the cooked moong dal, rice and moong dal. Talking about rice, like I told you, there were more than 250,000 varieties of indigenous rice. There were names, there are names even today. It's called Jil Jil Vaikunda. There is something called Alagu Samba. Alagu in Tamil is beautiful. So that means the bran or the husk looked so beautiful. There is a Vattadai Samba. Vattadai in Tamil means spider. So it looks like that. Recently I tried one rice called the Garudan Champa, where the bran has a small tilak like a namam. It has that. Then there is Jadai Samba that resembles the plait of a lady's hair. Then there is Jeeraga Samba, where you go travel across the south. All your biryanis are made with that because it looks like the jeerakam, the cumin seed. There is Pon Mani Samba, which looks like a golden bead. Pon Mani, golden bead. Togai Samba, it's shaped like a peacock's feather. So that is how evocative these rice varieties were. I'm going to add a little more rice. Now when you finally end up making this, it should be thin like the payasam, because what will happen again once it cools down is the moong dal will tend to expand and it will get thicker. Now to this I will add some ghee. A lot of it. Yeah, because in Andal's verses she says, Mooda neipeidu mulangai varivara, which is, ensure that there's a lot of ghee, but you also share it with someone, is what she says. I don't know if you guys can get any smell. Oh, wow, that's good. So this is cooking now. So as this is cooking, we go back. There is another story of the Akkara Adisal. Now, whatever we were talking now, I will come to the climax of the story later. I will add some jaggery to this. Now, if you were using old jaggery, this is new, that has literally been stripped off all its nutrients. You don't have to filter it. But if you were to use, say, old jaggery, make sure you just dilute it in a little bit of water and strain it for impurities. You need to do that. Now, as this will come, when you add the jaggery also, it will liquefy a little. This is a classic trait of sugar and jaggery. It will liquefy and eventually it will start coming together. Now, see, look at the consistency here. It will thicken. All right, so this will cook for some time now, and we move into another story about the Akkara Adisal from Srirangam's perspective. So there is a particular king by name Nanda Cholan, who happens to be in one of the old Chola capitals of Urayur. Urayur is about 15-20 kilometers from Trichy. Now he was one of those who didn't have a daughter, or he didn't have a child. He prays to the Lord, and the Lord is Perumal is known to have told his wife Lakshmi that you be born as a child, and at a later point of time in life I will come and marry you. So he notices one day on his daily outings, he notices the baby inside a lotus pond, and since he notices her there, she is named Kamalavalli. Kamalam is lotus, Kamalavalli. And Kamalavalli, again, long story short, she grows up and then she becomes of a marriageable age and says, I want to get married to the Lord at Srirangam. Now, the Lord at Srirangam is already married to Ranganayaki Tayar. But it so happens that Lord Ranganatha is enamored by her love. And even today, he takes a trip. And back then also this has happened. He goes there to get married, and the king, that is the Urayur king, the bride's father, builds a temple for homecoming. He calls it Alagiya Manavalan. Alagiya Manavalan is handsome bridegroom. So it's a homecoming, it's welcoming him. So he builds that. There is a wedding ceremony that happens, and obviously Ranganatha is absconding from Srirangam. Goddess Ranganayaki Tayar catches whiff of this, and she's obviously not pleased to hear what is going on. Nobody will be. And to add to it, what he also does is he gives away his wedding ring to her. Yeah, full drama. He gives it, and then he comes back to Srirangam, and then that's when he realizes he's given away his ring. Obviously, he's swept off. So he does what he does. He has it in him to go on a procession around the temple streets and to collect money to buy a new ring to give it to Ranganayaki Tayar. He does this, collects money. It's a procession that happens even now. He comes, he tries to go into that Sannadhi to give it to her, but he is pelted with butter and fruits. That's a very nice way of pelting. So he's pelted. Even today this happens, where he goes, he takes that trip across the Kaveri stays there, finishes the wedding, comes back, and he raises funds, if I can put it that way, and is pelted by butter and fruits. So obviously, someone had to intervene and then say, you know what, it's fine, just accept him. I know there is something that has gone wrong, but accept him. So that is the only day in 365 days where Perumal and Tayar are brought together. It's called the Serthi Sevai. Serthi means together. Serthi Sevai, where they are brought together and made to sit in the Serthi Mandapam. This is there in Srirangam. And on that particular day, they make the akkar adisal in these terracotta pots, and once it is made, they break it. Now, during the whole month of Panguni, if to give you an understanding of how this was historically, if you look at Sangam literature mentions Srirangam in both the Ahananuru and Silappadikaram. It talks about, he compares in the Ahananuru to the bride's bare forehead. She's obviously not wearing a bindi, to a place which is the next day after the Panguni Uttram. So he says it is so bare, like the next day of the Panguni Uttram. So that's how busy the Panguni Uttram is. So this, if you notice now, it has thickened very nicely. It will cook a little bit more. I apologize, this induction is something new that I'm working with. Some more ghee. No, there is absolutely, you need to have that element of ghee. So as this is cooking, we move back to the story of Srivilliputturu. Now, Andal was obviously enamored by the Lord, that she says she will offer 100 tadas of butter and 100 tadas of akkar adisal. Tadas, in today's context, is the size of a pond. That's how much he says she will offer. So the measurement, the size of a pond, 100 cups, 100 of butter and 100 of the akkar adisal. But it so happens she goes to Srirangam, she's married away and gone. It is Ramanujar who comes in later, realizes that she has prayed this and does the promise on her behalf. So I will now sing that particular verse in the Ragam Kamas that mentions the akkar adisal. And for the translation, just so many of you may not understand Tamil, I swear to him, my fiancé in Tirumalirum Choling, 100 tadas of butter, 100 tadas of akkar adisal, filled to the brim, nicely spread out. Will the radiant hero come for these, if not for me? Now, even today, as a token, this happens on the 27th day of Margazhi. It is called Koodarevalli. There is that Koodarevalum Sir Govinda, if you may know the Tirupavais. So on that particular day, on the 27th day, the first Utsavam that happens is the Nuru Tada Utsavam, as it is called. So the Nuru Tada Utsavam, what they will do is, as a representation, they will present 100 cups of butter and 100 cups of akkar adisal. And it is distributed. It's one of the most amazing prasadams. And I will now sing Naru Narampudi. Taran Nara Naram Podil Malirum Sholai Naram Podil Malirum Sholai Nambikna பராவி வைத்தே நூறு தடா வெண்ணெய் வாய் நேர்ந்து பராவி வைத்தே நூறு தடா நிறைந்த நூறு தடா நிறைந்த அக்காரடிசில் நூறு தடா நிறைந்த அக்காரடிசில் சொன்னே ஏறு திருவுடையா நின்று வந்து இவை கொள்ளுங்கொளோ ஏறு திருவுடையா நின்று வந்து இவை கொள்ளுங்கோளோ கொள்ளுங்கோளோ ஓ The akara addisil is done. I am just going to garnish this with lots of cashew and raisins. Now all of this is only a later addition if you look at it. Traditional prasadams, now many people will say akara addisil is like chakra pongal. No, it's not. You're touching a raw nerve by saying something like that. It's not. It's very different. Actually, the traditional chakra pongal that is made for the month of Pongal is nothing but rice, dal, and jaggery. That's it. We have made it fancy today. The same when Pongal, whatever is made is just rice and moong dal, and they'll just crush pepper and cumin. That's it. We have added nuts. We have added. That's how it is. So it's not the same. The chakra pongal is very different from the akara addisil. Some more of the nuts. Might as well use it since it's there. And come on, guys, that's how it works. You heard the amount of dairy that goes into the prasadams. I just sang that for you. No, and the thing is, in today's context, we are looking at it as a lot of ghee. But back then, it was probably one of those days that was served like this. So it's good to have that kind, and ghee is great. So this is done. I will just garnish this with some kesar. Now, you must also add a wee bit of pachakalpuram, which is edible camphor. Now, that is important. And that is what gives it that nice prasadam touch. So essentially, these kind of presentations, when I do them, it is to demystify prasadams. You know, prasadam, there's obviously a sacred touch to it. Nobody's saying no, but it is what the common man could do. It is what the common man could afford. And ultimately, all of this is what brings people together. Like over prasadam, people bonded. Over prasadam, people had conversations, memories. So the next time when you make this, I want you to just recollect this and think about it, that you're actually biting into a spoonful of history. That's all I wanted. We can take over, Shoba.
So we're going to let it cool and then hand it over to you for those who wait. You have to. Yeah, it's 7:30. So do you have any questions? And You can just ask the questions, whichever one of us can answer will answer, or sometimes both of us will answer. If you have any questions, if you would like to. Yes?
You mean what has happened
To the quality
to
of
the quality, or how did it evolve?
Yes, yes. So, you want to go first?
Go ahead. I'll talk
Yeah.
about the evolution.
Yeah. So he'll talk about the evolution. I will. I think COVID happened to the Tirupati Laddu. If there is a little bit of reduction of quality, that's what I attributed it to. Because as you saw, these are very expensive dishes to make. I think the temple coffers, even for Balaji, were affected by a little bit of COVID. But Rakesh, you can talk about the evolution of the.
So if you look at the temple prasadams in Tirupati, they are served across 3 different timings. You have a balabogam, which is the mid-morning. You have rajabogam, which is lunch, which is an elaborate meal. And then you have shayana bogam, which is in the night. Just before the Lord retires, there is a meal that is served. Now, during your trips to Tirupati, if you've noticed, they'll carry those gangalams, as they are called. You might have seen. Every gangalam, the largest one is called, the measurement is called a sola. It's 25 kilos. That is the quantity that should. Then you have a half sola, quarter, 1/8 sola, and all of that. Now, in the context of the Tirupati Laddu, if you look at the inscriptions there, if you understand, if you talk to people who understand inscriptions, what I am given to understand is it came in subsequently during the time of the Vijayanagaras. Otherwise, it was only your all your Kadamba Sadam, Kshira Annam, Ven Pongal, Chakra Pongal, Akkara, all of this is there. But the concept of laddus came with Vijayanagaras because they felt the need to give people laddus as something to take back. Even today, you bring your Tirupati laddu back, it will last good in normal, I'm saying even for Madras weather, it will last good for 1 week. So that was the whole idea. And people from across were coming to Tirupati, right? And they needed like a prasadam to take back. And one of the reasons why they came up with the laddu is because of that.
Anyone else? Yes. Yeah. Or do you people want to walk? Okay, and I'll repeat the question. Is that okay, Sneha? Because people are in the middle.
Sorry, no, I had a question just in, how important you feel is faith to the whole sensorial experience of this food, because I think we live in times now where, so much is happening, it's getting faith is becoming a little divisive, and, and also in terms of the dairy aspect that you were talking about, and people are also evolving, people's faith is evolving, people's practice of food is evolving. I remember trying to go vegan in between, and Rakesh and I had a long conversation about it, and he was not too happy. But do you think that people will end up missing out on the experience in a way, or do you think that there is a way that offerings such as these will adapt and evolve, or will it become mutually exclusive?
So I have a view. Rakesh, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it will eventually evolve and adapt because ultimately this is about feeding people, right? So there are temples in Madurai, even today, quite old, where one of the prasadams made is the chicken biryani. Because ultimately this is what the people in the village want. Because you may offer it as a token to the Lord, but ultimately you have to feed the village. So it is evolving as we speak. And I won't be surprised if we have a vegan, if you go to, like cake shops today, there are vegan options. You can get whatever. So it will evolve to that point. The food that we eat today is something that has evolved over a period of time. If not for the Portuguese coming in, we won't be having tomatoes and red chilies in our food. Can you imagine a rasam without tomatoes? So it is mainstream. So that's how, the prasadam that were made 3,000 years ago is probably not even of the same quality as what, their quality was so much more superior because of the ingredient availability. And today it may not be the case. They may not even be making the same quantity. It took the Vijayanagara kingdom to change the laddu. So many other prasadams are there, but what is talked about today is the laddu.
And what do you think, Rakesh, on how important is the faith to the experience of this kind of food?
It's all important, but...
Do
Repeat the question, we can't hear.
Sorry, I was saying how important does you feel that
How important is faith to prasadams and to the experience of the prasadams?
But what is the experience? Meaning, it's something that you do from your heart. It could be anything, right? Like always, kids, whenever the prasadams are getting made at home, they'll always get the first spoon. So what is it that, what is faith according? So there's nothing. It's your own connect that you have. There's nothing said. I mean, you could offer just plain white rice, which has not been cooked. You could offer milk. You could offer almond milk.
Yeah.
It is ultimately your emotion, the connect that you have, the faith that you have.
Yeah. Shall I add to this or do we want to move on? Yeah. I think that in prasadams there are two glaciers that are colliding. I have a slightly different take than Rakesh. I think, for example, in the Udupi temples and in most South Indian temples, they cook with firewood. And actually most temples, even across India. So environmentalists will ask, is the prasadam going to evolve so that we don't cut down so much firewood and we do it in induction stoves like here? I have struggled with this because I'm a lover of tradition and I'm also a lover of the environment. So then when you have these two glaciers colliding, it's a slippery slope. You can say, okay, Udupi temple or okay, Jagannath Puri temple, don't do firewood. But they actually plant wood as they cut. And these temples are sustainably doing it. So then, okay, so no firewood, the taste is going to change. Let's do induction oven, taste is going to change. So Rakesh thinks it will evolve. I'm saying I don't want it to evolve. So we are a little different. But sir, you had a question.
Yes, in some South Indian temples, when you went in line for prasadam, they would not give it in a container, you have to take it in a hand. And there is something about eating with hand.
Yes. It is a sensorial experience.
Correct.
It is something that when you cook, right? So when I have to shoot for some of my recipes and when they ask me not to use my hand, I find it weird. Because when you use your rice, when your hands to mix that rice and dal, it is sensorial. You're touching it, and there is something from your hand that also goes into it. It's very important. I mean, I've seen weddings here, especially in some of the communities, where they will actually serve the rice using hand. That doesn't happen now. I mean, I know I've been grossed out looking at it. I will admit to that. But it is a sensorial experience. One old party, and since you brought up the context of the hand, she taught me, this was in Palakkad, and she said, what is it, how will you check for salt? I said, I'll keep some in a cup before the Lord and I will taste it. She said, no, without doing that, how will you do it? Then she said, use your hand. She said, put a drop in your hand, and if it burns in the sense not like a blister burn, but if you're not able to withstand the heat, that means the salt flavors are not balanced. Yeah. Whereas if you're able to manage the heat, that means the salt is balanced. Yeah. So these are things only your hands can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you use that grinding stone, it is the goodness of your hands that go into it. Yeah. So having the prasadam in your hand, maybe put sanitizer before and then you can have it.
I'll just add to this and then we can move to Lata. So somebody in Europe asked me, what are two things that you can say about the Indian civilization? Now, everybody in this room is very accomplished and you can come up with a list of things that define India. At that moment, what I came up with the context of food and faith, my book, what the question was asked, the two things that define faith in India is that it is a sensorial experience and it is a ritualistic experience. Those two things are what separate us. The sensorial experience is what Rakesh just talked about with the hand, and I think the colonial mindset that now all of us have insist on using forks and everything like that. But now let me contradict what I said earlier, saying I don't want the temple prasadams to evolve, to say that in Payani I found that in the olden days apparently they would stamp on the bananas with their feet and then mix the prasadam. And now when I went to Payani, as I say in my chapter, the chaps are all saying with great pride, Ma, there's not a single hand that is touched. It's entirely machine made, this Panchamritam. And he was trying to reassure me that this hand stuff is not going on. But I was like, okay, what is lost? What is lost and what is gained? But we go to.
I just wanted to ask, I was very interested how saffron came to be used, kesar. Obviously, it's very traditional in kesari bath or in even the recipe you made. So, given that it only grows in Kashmir as far as I know in India, does that mean that regular supplies of saffron, of kesar were available all over India? Or is it something that got recently added to our
Okay.
Just
Okay.
repeat the question.
Yeah, go ahead. Repeat the question.
What Lata is asking,
How did saffron make its way
you can
into...
hear, but this is for YouTube. Actually, I think that's what Sneha means. How is saffron come into South Indian prasadams? Because it originated in Kashmir, and that was the question.
See, so if you look at it historically, most of the temple prasadams were suggestions given by the dynasties that ruled, the kings. Like how Vijayanagaras made the laddu. There is also something that I've heard where the avial was something that was given by the Kerala royal family to the Padmanabha temple. So they obviously, since they donated a lot, they had a lot of their say. And the kings obviously had access to all of this. So this is something that they would use in their cooking on day-to-day basis. And this is something that they would gift to the temple, the riches. And obviously the kitchen would put it to use and make prasadams out of it.
But Lata, I want to pull back. He's absolutely right, but I want to also pull back to it. I think if you go to the essence of prasadams, it was a communal effort where everybody ended up with just one hand of this high ghee dish. But also the essence of it was an offering of something that was rare and precious and therefore expensive. So saffron is rare and precious and therefore expensive. So in the evolution, I think the reason we put saffron in South India is for that feeling of sacrifice. I'm offering you something that is rare to me. It's hard for me to do. And so I will keep the pact in order to get something. But over there.
Yeah, I was just referring to the saffron because even when they do the puja, for the tirtha saffron is used.
Yes.
So it's not just for the prasadam.
Correct.
And including the offerings. The first offering is that
Tirtha.
Tirtha, which is saffron, water, and maybe
Pachakalpur.
ghee.
Yes.
So saffron is there in the puja. So
Yes.
it's an extension.
It's there even in the mala.
It's an extension of the puja into the prasadam.
Yes.
Correct. Anyone else? Yeah, in the back.
What have you talked about? So your entire sweet prasadam is pretty much connected to that. So if you're able to mix faith and prasadam, you ever go to a Shiva temple?
My favorite story from my book involves a Shiva temple. I'll just repeat the question. Most of what we have, and especially Rakesh has talked about, is Vaishnava temples. Is there a link to Shiva temples that can be made? And I'll answer first and then pass it on to Rakesh. My favorite story involves a prasadam in Kashi by the goddess Annapurna. And Shiva, I mean, it's a long story and it's there in my book, but the reason I love it so much is that the husband and wife fight. The husband thinks he's right, but he's not. And then when he realizes the goddess, he says, I am the king of the universe and I am the end all and be all. She says, okay, is that so? I'm leaving. And she leaves for Kashi and the world comes to a halt. Then Shiva comes to Kashi and makes nice. He comes and takes the food from Annapurna. So in this powerful God as a seeker, as somebody who has come and said, listen, I'm sorry, and will you please give me the prasadam? And Annapurna, of course, is the Sadapurna. She's Annapurna, Sadapurna, Shankara, Prana. She is the prana of Shankara. So she's Vallabha because she is benevolent. And so this is the Shiva temple prasadam. But you're absolutely right because they say Vishnu likes bhoga, abharana, and Shiva is yoga and abhisheka. So most of Shiva temples I found were entirely about abhishekam and not so much about the eating bit. But that's, you want to add?
No, Shiva being an ascetic, very few temples will actually have a prasadam for Shivan. One of those temples is the Chidambaram Nataraja temple, where they make something called a samba sadam, which is made with a type of rice. It's basically pepper and cumin that is roasted, made into a powder, and mixed with rice with salt and tempered. And a katrika gotsu, gostu as it is called, not gotsu, gostu. So that is something that is made with different coriander, red chilies, tur dal, chana dal. They've all ground, made into a paste. It's that is a powder that is added. Then it's cooked in tamarind paste, and katrika eggplants are then cooked along with it. So it's very unusual. I've still not been able to put a finger and wonder how this particular prasadam made its way into the Chidambaram temple. But very, very few temples like that will actually, Shivan temples will have a prasadam.
I think we have time for 2-3 more. Yes. One on this side, one on that side. And yeah.
My question is related to what you said about the multi-sensorial. Whenever I taste prasadam or even langar, or even for that matter wedding feasts when they're cooked by the community, it's the most delicious, my food memory. And not to say that hotels do this not, it is, but this kind of leaves you feeling very satiated and very peaceful. So I'm just curious to know, in that making of the meat, especially from a verse or from scripture, is there something that talks about that quality of food that makes you feel so, even if you're not just having faith in that?
Got it. So the question is, prasadams are simple foods. Why do we feel good about eating them? And what is it about prasadams that even though they're so simple that we feel good? I have a view, but Rakesh, you can...
No, since you compare it with, let's say, a temple prasadam and a hotel, same recipe that is made there, the difference is essentially, someone in the hotel, it's his job to do it. Right? Whereas in the temple kitchen, there's a lot more emotion associated. Granted, that's also his job, but there's a lot more connectedness when you're making a prasadam. And of course, the traditional cooking methods and techniques add to it, which is something that you will not find in a hotel. So there are these prasadams that are available in prasadam counters outside, which will taste very different. That is a business run by the HRNC or whatever it is. That is very different. That is you can get that in any of your supermarkets, whatever. It's a murku, adarsam like that. Yeah. But whereas the temple kitchen makes something similar, which is very, very different. And it is these smaller nuances is what brings out that taste.
And the additional nuance that I want to bring in is something we neither of us have talked about, is that prasadams are defined by two things. One is that they are meant to be shared, and the quantity, therefore, that you will get is small. So it is as much about sattvic food, which is light on the body, but as much about community. And prasadam is a community. So there's a line I write in my book that says, Carnegie Hall has nothing on Hindu temples, because you stand there, the curtain is closed, somebody will come and sing, they'll play the dholak, then they'll be chanting, and all the devotees will have their hands up, and they'll be like a rock concert. And then when the curtain goes up, it's electrifying. So the multi-sensorial experience does not come just from the prasadam, but the whole music, the dance, the movement, all of it. And I write the book from a point of view of a seeker who is very skeptical about the hypocrisies and pettiness that surround all religion. That's my stance. But it's hard not to be seduced by this full-on color, And
I just want to add to what you're saying, Shoba, because in your book, I think you bring it out very clearly, the kitchen in Puri.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it. The whole question of sanctity,
Yes.
the fact that
Yes.
that they don't eat, they fast,
Yes.
they finish cooking.
Yes.
And they've served
Yes.
and offered. So there's that element.
Yeah. Shri is right. It's
That adds to
absolutely
not sanctity or whatever. That adds to the aura
correct.
of the prasadam.
And it's not Puri temple. Nobody else outside is allowed. It was the Ananta Vasudev temple in Bhubaneswar, which is modeled on the Puri kitchen. But on that side, somebody had a question. Yes.
Shoba, do tell us a little about the so-called taboo ingredients. what are accepted in certain places and what is not accepted. As a child, when I grew up, it was perfectly okay to offer radish
Yes.
to God.
Yes.
Whereas here in the south, we know it's not taken at all. So tell us a little about
Yeah.
studies on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, most Indian families have taboo ingredients, but I'd like to flip it around to say that the amount of ingredients that were used in temples and all across India was limited not by the taboo factor, but the insistence on using traditional varieties and also indigenous. So in that sense, it's like, I think today the only remnant that I see of that at home is what we call the shraddh, the cooking that we do for propitiating the ancestors, where the vigna mungo, which is the whole urad dal that is native to India, is used. Why is sesame so important in the shraddh cooking? Because it is indigenous to India. So I just flip the prism a little bit to say it's not so much taboo as much as a insistence on using indigenous. And I love that, because otherwise my kids will never eat sesame balls. They'll eat tiramisu. So, the fact is that, but Rakesh, please continue.
No, I think it was about, now, why would mooli, radish be okay there and not here? It's obviously something from there. To add to it, I think you pretty much nailed it. They were all considered English vegetables. Right, like carrot, beans, potatoes. You will never find them in traditional. Today you have a potato sambar or any other vegetables that are considered English, like a radish sambar, can be there. But back in the days, or when you have ancestral worship, you will not find any of that. You will not even find asafoetida. You will not find red chilies. It is only black pepper. So that's how it works.
Correct. Sorry, I'm only looking to see if anyone's raising their hands. But yes, Prabha. Are there any temples where there are women cooks? I have not gone to Assam to the Shakti Pitas. I know in Guwahati where the prasadam is actually the menstrual blood of the goddess, and there is.
Yes, the Terali Korakata, I was going to say
yes.
that.
But the greatest display of women cooks that I have seen is actually in Kerala now that the Pongala rice,
Yes.
the Pongala. So the women cooks they do the communities, like Muthumariyamman temple, the women make the rice in the pot. But
so they assemble in this festival called Pongala, which is for the goddess there. She's known to have superpowers on that particular day. They make something called a Terali Korakata. Terali is the fresh leaf of cinnamon. That is what is dried, and that becomes bay leaf. So they make it's essentially rice flour that's cooked along with jaggery, and there's cardamom powder and coconut added. It's literally like you can hold it in between your fists, but what they do is they pinch a small ball, wrap it inside this terli leaf, and they steam it. And abundance of whatever else was there. A lot of rice flour, of course, and then there was this bay leaf, the fresh terli ela as it is called, was available, and they offered it. And it has a very peculiar smell because of that leaf.
So a woman's place may be in the kitchen in the modern world, but in the temple kitchens, the woman's place is outside. Unless...
I have something to add to the women cooking part. So in a village in Tamil Nadu, somewhere near Madurai, I have found that there is a village festival where there is an animal is sacrificed.
Yes.
So it's usually one offering to sacrifice a goat or a buffalo or whatever the animal is sacrificed. And the man who is offering it to the goddess, along with the pujari, he sacrifices the animal, and the women from that person's family, they cook this biryani or whatever they are making,
Yeah.
and it is served to the entire community.
Community.
So
Right.
it's like the man of the house is sacrificing the animal,
The
the
man
women
does
are
it.
cooking,
Cooks it.
and the children or the youngsters who are there, they serve. So the entire village, they sit around this one place, around the Muthumariyamman temple or
So I think what you're saying is also exactly that. It's anytime community is involved.
very community
Yeah.
thing, and it is so every person from that family,
They cook, yeah.
They get involved in this whole process.
Correct. I think there were 2 more hands. Yeah.
There's a Shoba Narayan temple in Bhubaneswar in Mumbai,
Okay.
Yeah.
where there is a lady priest.
Okay.
And she's a priest. She also prepares the food.
Okay.
I'm also the author of a book on
Sujata,
foods.
you
Okay.
must rise. We should spotlight you, but
About 140 religious sites in India.
Fantastic.
My book came out last year, Shoba is aware.
yes.
Okay. Wow.
Sneha, 2 more questions or?
It's interesting you brought the Sun Temple, the Suryanar Temple. It's there in Kumbakonam, and I went there. Kumbakonam, Tanjavur is hot side, and this temple is bang in the middle of rice fields.
Yeah.
But just take a guess what the prasadam is.
Not rice? I mean.
It's wheat. It's wheat. It's a Goduma Rava Kesari. And I asked him,
That is special to Surya.
I asked him why. Because he said Surya Bhagavan is, he has bad teeth. He said it's not good. He's very old. Romba kelavar avar. I said great.
He's not able to eat.
No, it was very interesting how wheat made its way into the prasadam in the south.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that is, and it's bang in the middle of a rice field.
belt, yes.
Right? Like why would you do this? Oh no, he can't. I said why? You can still arisi kurna, like broken rice can be made into something. He's like no. His tooth is very bad.
And any other questions?
Pretty much.
We wrap. Okay. If you don't have any other questions, Rakesh and I will do some.
I was trying to just add one point. My name, by the way, is Sujata Shuklarajan. So, you all were talking about, the questions were coming about tradition and evolution and whether temple foods are likely to change. I think you should look at it like this. Temple foods are of 2 categories. One is a prasadam, which is what is offered to the deity and then distributed to us. The other is a naivedyam or bhog, which is offered to the deity and which we don't see. What we see as prasadam is just 1/100th of the preparations which are actually offered to the deity across India.
Yeah.
From my discussions with more than 100 priests and Swamigal, I think the tradition of preparation, the ingredients, the methodology, the vessels used, the firewood, whatever is offered to the deity as naivedya, that is never going to change. It is the commercial kitchens where prasadam is made, where all the changes keep coming, keep evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't expect that any change will come.
I have a small point about that. See, take the example of the puliyodara, tamarind rice, right? Now, traditionally, it was just a tamarind concentrate that was added, nothing else. You will probably have some lentils to it. But today there are temples that is offered where the prasadam is offered to the Lord in the madapalli that is made. I'm not talking about a commercial kitchen, where there is red chili that is added. So there is a tweak that happens. Yes. There is an amalgam that goes around. Yes. We may not even notice that amalgamation, but it is bound to happen. Because, I mean, that is the stage where we are. Yes. And as we speak today, things are evolving. So I don't know if it is right to say that can never change, because today what you're savoring, it was probably a change that happened 200 years ago.
Yes, correct. So, do you guys want to eat or not? Because I think we need to stop if you're going to line up and have. So, I'll be outside signing my books. Rakesh will be here feeding the people who came. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Rakesh.
Thank you, Shoba. It was lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.